Hi, good morning. How are you doing?
Good
I should
morning.
say buonasera.
Sí, buonasera here. This is Suzanne Hoffman, everybody. She is an author, I would say now, specialized in Piemonte, and is maybe even crazier about Piemonte than myself.
I don't know. I don't know. We all love it very much. And I would say, and I'm glad you said I'm crazy about Piemonte because it's not, and I don't mean to say just the wines, but it's the people. I like to consider myself really knowledgeable about the wine families. There's stories behind the labels.
And that's what got me hooked too. And that's why I wanted to start doing tours. It was more about the experiences and the people that you get to know. And, you know, it makes that wine even so much more special.
Mm-hmm.
And you discovered Piemonte when you were living in Switzerland, right?
Yes, I did. 1999 was my first trip there with my mother. Rained like crazy for 4 days in November.
Wow.
I had 45 minutes of dry weather that we could walk through Alba. It was great.
But that's the feeling you're supposed to get at that time of year.
Yes.
So
yes. Well, I didn't know that. We didn't have the advantage of blogs like your blog and all of your input and the tours that you have today.
Yeah, that's true. And so you just fell in love with it and you kept coming back to Piemonte from Switzerland.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so you're living in Colorado right now, but your heart is in Piemonte. Yes. And so Suzanne wrote this fantastic book. I have it here so you guys can see.
Thank you.
The Labor of Love. And this is your first book that you've ever written?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and it's fabulous because it may have been one of the first of its kind to really dig down deep into the history and having that connect to these important families. And also with a strong, I mean, there's definitely the emphasis is the women in wine or women wine families, right?
Yeah, the wine family women. But you know, I'm one of those, you can't leave out the men because they are amazing partners to these women and amazing supports through the years, not just now, but a lot of these women, in 200 hours of interviews, I never ran across any kind of disparaging remarks about the men and their family or even the men in their village. There were some problems, but yeah. But the overall was that the women really owe a great debt of gratitude to the men, and the men owe a great debt to the women for having supported them for so many years. And
definitely, and you know, it's just something that people are talking about now about the women winemakers, but they really were involved from the very beginning, and without them during the wars and everything, this, you know, they wouldn't be where they are today. So that's what makes her book so fun and special and interesting. And one of the chapters, actually the first real chapter, is on Giulia Colbert. Is that how you pronounce her name?
Giulia Colbert Falletti.
Okay. Yes. And so I wanted to take the theme of March being the Women's Month and everything, and also for the Guide Collective, I immediately thought of this French woman who is said to have played a very important role in making what Barolo is today, because my thing is wine. And then I had this thought, well, I have to ask Suzanne, because you're an expert and you call her your guardian angel, right?
I do.
And she was a very special woman, not just for the wine, more so for her good deeds and her philanthropy. And so we will definitely get into that. Maybe something more about Giulia. We'll call her Giulia, but her name was Giulia.
I'm on a first name basis with her.
Okay, that's right. So you can tell us about Giulia, maybe how she came to Italy and Piemonte, just very briefly, because I know it's a long story, and how she ended up here.
Yeah, well, it's a long story. I just want to say first that Chiara's hands are on the cover of the book, and Chiara Boschis and Pierangelo Vaquero and Maurizio Rosso are really my little angels who guided me quite a bit through the book, and to Giulia. They really opened the door to more knowledge that was really not available in English. I would dare say Labor of Love gives you more words in English than I found anywhere else. But she was born in France in 86. There's some dispute within the Vatican, but that was the dawn of the Revolutionary War, and she was born into an aristocratic family. Her grandfathers, both had positions in courts. Her paternal grandfather had been the famous minister of Louis XIV, finance minister. And then she is a descendant, actually, on her mother's side of King Louis XIV as well. And so it's really quite an interesting story from her standpoint of an aristocratic background. Then she was on the move as a refugee. Her grandmother was guillotined, and her father took her mother and her siblings to Germany and Netherlands. And they lived in exile until 1802, when Napoleon granted amnesty to most of the aristocrats. I thought it was interesting, most of the aristocrats, not all of them.
Yeah.
So she returned.
The other ones were.
Yeah, and she had a very enlightened father. Her mother died at a young age, but her father was very enlightened and educated all of them, the girls and his sons. And so Giulia had quite a rich background, quite a rich educational background before she even married, which that's another thing. She married Carlo Tancredi, and that's what gets us to Barolo, because he was descendant of the Falletti family, who had been having their connections with Langhe since the 14th century, I think it was. Wow. And they married in 1805, I think it was, that they married. Okay. Sorry.
And that was
1807 in Paris. Sorry.
Okay. Wow. And that was also because Napoleon wanted to align Piemonte with France, or.
Yes, it was Napoleon. She was in the court. She was in Paris at the time, and Napoleon wanted to increase the strength of the relationship between Piemonte and France at that time. And it was an arranged marriage, but it was also a love match. And I think that's important to remember, that it wasn't that Giulia married a man because she was told she had to marry. She married a man she loved deeply, and he loved her.
Okay. So yeah, this is where, when I had heard about Giulia Colbert, it was from visiting the historical winery, the Marchesi di Barolo, which is right in the center near the castle. And it's pretty much thought of, this is where Barolo was invented, is kind of the thought, and they always tell the story about Giulia Colbert there when they do the tours. And I thought it was so cool when I first discovered that, wow, Barolo the wine may have been invented by a woman. So I started to read more about it and realized that there are a lot of myths to it. There's nothing certain about it, but the idea is really interesting. And in that time period, there were definitely a few players who were working on making Barolo into a dry wine and not sweet, as you mentioned in your book. And it might have even had a little bit of fizz and a little bit of a rosé color. Yeah, so the wine basically, they liked sweet wines, but it was also because of the lack of knowledge and technology and not being able to fully ferment their wines, which made them have that residual sugar and make it sweet. But
I think a lot of the style that they had then, they liked it because that was the way the wine was
made.
Had
to like it.
There was no choice. There was not much choice at all.
But France, on the other hand, has hundreds of years of experience on Italian winemaking. So the idea that, the story that I knew was that she brought along this French enologist, Audard, but then reading your book, it actually is, they may have connected at some point, but there's no proof of that. always like to make a joke when I'm doing my tours, like, the Italians are not 100 convinced that a French woman invented their Barolo, but it's just to joke about the rivalry. But she did play an important role. We know that for sure.
Played a very important role. Listen, she played an important role in Italy's history, in the Risorgimento, and she's very much an unknown, I would say underdiscovered, name of my publishing company. But, you know, we are talking, you've basically covered everything about her in terms of the wine. It's a mystery. She didn't leave behind a lot of writings. It's a pity that Silvio Pellico, who mentioned her quite a bit in his memoirs and was a dear friend of hers, particularly in her widowhood, didn't leave much for us to really glean as to what her role was, but we do know it was an important role. And I dare say that in her palazzo, in the Palazzo Barolo in Turin, I'm sure that Barolo, the wine, was quite often the conversation, because she had intellectuals from all over Europe. She had ambassadors. She had the papal nuncio, Camillo Cavour, excuse me, himself spent quite a bit of time in her salon talking about the issues of the period. And she was a conservative, but she was also very open-minded and very much a reformer, and passionate about the children of Turin, the poor of Turin, and her husband shared that passion. They had no children. They and it was a choice. They adopted the children.
It was a choice. Oh, wow.
It was a choice. They adopted the children of I would say, the poor of Turin, particularly the orphans, and did some really phenomenal work that today still you can find in law books. Her work on prison reform and her work on creating the Opera Pia Barolo, which was her foundation until it was dissolved, until they had to sell the winery during the fascist period. But
right, so her husband died, and then she was left all of his inheritance, right? And he said, you know, use that to help the poor and the prisons, women prisoners, right?
She helped everybody. Specifically, her work was with women. If I could tell this story, the first time she ever had any interaction with the prisoners was, I think it was like around 1814. Yes, and it was the Sunday after Easter. And she was out on a walk with one of her loyal servants, and they came upon a procession of St. Augustine, the Society of St. Augustine, and she knelt. She was a very pious woman. And so she knelt, and as the procession passed by, she heard all these screaming and catcalling and stuff, and looked up, and it was from the top floor of the prison across the street, the Senate prison. So she went with her servant to the prison and asked to see the prisoners. She had money on her, and she wanted to give the money to the prison for because in those days you had to support yourself in prison, believe it or not. And so she saw the male prisoners. They were very polite, very, very cordial to her. And then she asked to see the women. They spat on her, they assaulted her, they called her names. And she stood very, you know, I wish we had as much about the wine as we have about what she did with the prisons, because she came back, and she kept going back until they trusted her. And then she formed a school for former prisoners and reformed prostitutes, quite often the same people. And also for the children. Her husband was the mayor of Turin for 4 years in the 1820s. And he is responsible for a lot of the paving that was done, a lot of the gardens that we enjoy today in Turin, the fountains, and kindergarten. He started kindergartens. The two of them together, they're just so unknown by people outside of Italy. And I dare say, I don't think a lot of Italians appreciate and know the contribution that they played.
I agree. I feel like, you know how it is in Italy, every street is named after some historical figure, and it's probably outside of this area. I mean, they really are unknown, unfortunately. Do you think that Giulia was seen as a threat at all by anybody? Is that information that, I mean, to be this really strong woman like that back then?
You know, who can say?
You don't
Who can
have
say?
that.
Women have always, women who are strong are always seen as a threat by someone, you know, it obviously didn't bother her because she continued doing her good works through her life. And incidentally, she and her husband are now venerated. So that means we have one more step, beatification, you know, before they are made saints. So they have to go through one more miracle. But it just shows the importance of the work that they did for the poor and the kindness that they gave to people. So whether or not she was seen as a threat, I don't know, and I don't think she cared.
But you didn't find any stories about that? Or
no, I'm sure they exist. You know, my Italian isn't good enough for me to really dig into the literature about her, but I did read a few books about her. And I'm sure out there, perhaps there's some biographies that exist in Italian, but nothing that I could find. I know that a friend of mine who was doing his PhD at Oxford and in prison reform, he's a lawyer and he did it having to do with prisons. And he couldn't believe when he ran across her, because we were talking one time when he came to Piemonte and we were talking about her and he goes, "What? You mean she had something to do with wine?" I said, "Yeah." And so it's interesting that the people who know her from wine don't know about her prison work, and the people from the other side, from the prison reform work, don't know about the wine.
Also in the book, there are many other beautiful stories that readers can enjoy. And yeah, we'll see. I guess we'll see if she becomes a saint eventually. And I would definitely consider her a woman to praise, remember, admire, and learn about. So hopefully people, this will open their eyes. And can you tell maybe some of the viewers where they can find your book?
I mean, I did independent publishing, so we don't have a distributor in Italy, but we have still a few more books, not many, but a few more books. And here in the States, you can find it on Amazon, and you can also find it on winefamilies.com. I have shipped the book all over the world. So if you contact me at Suzanne@winefamilies.com, I'm more than happy to find out the shipping costs, and we can see what we can do.
That would be best, to go straight to the source.
Thank you.
And help another woman. And I thank you. If there's anything else you want to, last words you'd like to say about her, that before we...
You know, I'll think about all these things later, because there's just so much about her. And if I get going, I can talk the legs off a coffee table, as you know. But I think the most important thing to remember about her is her generosity and her love for the people of Turin. And she actually traveled all over Europe. She did things that women just didn't do in those days. And the men, and it's important, as I started saying at the beginning, there were the men in her life that supported that. Started with her father and then her husband. After the cholera outbreak, she went in, what was it, 1835, she went to take care of the patients along with him in the palazzo, in the basement of the palazzo. And you know, he allowed her to continue to do it even after he had cholera. So, and also the Vatican was very supportive of her. So I think that's one of the most endearing things about her, is that she inspired people to work with her, not against her, to go back to your earlier question. And for me, she's such an inspiration.
We need more of that today. People need to think about that.
Do we ever?
To give.
Do we ever?
Okay. Well, thank you for your time, Suzanne. And again, please contact her, or you can contact me, and we can try to get you the book. And we'll be looking out for your new first new book of a trilogy that you're working on.
This is my first novel, Angel of Alta Langa. So I'm sticking with the angel theme.
And the Langa and the Piemonte.
Yes, and of course, and Sicily, which of course is my ancestral home. So a little bit of everything.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much. And
Thank you so much,
can't wait
Giulia.
for your
Thank you,
next book.
everybody. All right. You have a good